All right, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm going to get us kicked off. We're going to be talking about inheritance this afternoon. I don't have a lesson plan for you. The lesson, if you wanted to refer to a lesson plan, I think it would be the Mod 1 inheritance lesson. The idea here was that we're going to take some time to review some of the content from Mod 1, where we talked about inheritance. Based on like some of the check-ins that I've had with some of y'all, I think this is a topic where we might all be at different places. So for some of us, when you all were introduced to inheritance in Mod 1, that might have seemed like a really cool tool that you could incorporate in your project. And in fact, I think Tim said that one of the requirements was to incorporate inheritance in your project. And so I think like certain students tend to like latch on to this idea more than others. So I just want to take a moment to say, like, no matter where you're at, that's totally okay. If you don't remember a ton about inheritance from Mod 1, that's all right. We'll take some time to review that. If you feel really good about inheritance and you feel good about incorporating it in your project, that is awesome as well. I will try and give you some extra practices here. The monitor went off. Can you still hear me? Heck. Sorry, give me 1 second. Check my cords. Can I get a thumbs up if you all can still hear me? Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what was going on. Okay, so that's a little intro for you all. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to drop in the code help channel. I'm going to drop a little a inheritance activity for us. So go ahead and start working on that. I want to give everybody, I'll do about 10 minutes, let's say 5 minutes. I'm going to give everybody about 5 minutes to get started solo. And I would expect one of these activities or one of the bullets in this activity, I'd expect you to get tripped up at least one of them. And you might be at the place where the first bullet point, you're not entirely sure how to do that. And that's totally fine as well. So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to work individually. Then I'm gonna give you about 10 minutes to work in a small group. And then we'll go over it. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, what's up?
I was tardy by 2 minutes. What are we doing?
I posted it in the code help channel.
Right.
There's an activity for you to work on solo. And I'm going to give you all about 3 more minutes to work on this by yourself, and then I'll put you into some small groups.
Thank you.
All right. So I don't expect anyone to have this finished yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into some small groups. I'd like for you all to talk through this activity, share what you're able to do so far, discuss any pain points. I'm going to give you all 10 minutes to do this, and feel free to use the ask for help button if you need it. But I would like to, at the end of this 10 minutes, come back together, address any questions that might come up, or answer any questions that might come up, and then I'll give you some more time to keep working on this. And with that, I'll open up these rooms. Oh, do we have Adam? Adam, are you here? Missing an Adam.
Okay, I've got lunch buddy with Tanner right now, so I'm gonna pop off, but just want to let you know.
Cool. Okay. Did you grab attendance for me?
I did.
Thank you. It looked like they were all here.
Yeah, just Ryan, that was late.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep, see ya.
Have fun.
Yeah, and so that would just call which you don't need to do, like if you're going to use the method the same way as defined in the parent. But let's say you wanted to like push something into an array, or if you wanted to like add something. So let's say you wanted it, rather than just printing generic animal sound, you wanted it to print generic animal sound and also like woof or something. So you could do super and it would do generic animal sound, and then below that you could also put woof and it would print both of them because it would run both methods basically.
So it's just editing the method that already exists.
Yeah, well, it's like calling the method on the parent.
Mhm.
And we don't have to do self WAG.
No. Well, I mean,
So in animal, I have my speak here. But then if I put speak again here, it does this one and not this one.
Right. And I think that's maybe because like
this way. But yeah.
I think one thing you mentioned, Mike, that made me think like how this is implemented in Rails is that like if you go into
And we got time. Why not? Hey, Brian. We went through the exercise. Just finished actually. And Sandra is trying to figure out how to connect files. Is what she's trying to figure out. Or they, yeah.
Great, thank you. Did you all, I guess you all went over the activity, so did any questions come up from that?
Shoot.
I guess I'm trying to do the activity, but not have them all in the same file. And like inherit like an animal file, like Ruby file, and then like a dog Ruby file, and somehow require the animal class. I did like the inheritance, like little arrow, but yeah, I'm not sure how to like get it to know the other one besides that.
Do you want to share your screen real quick?
Oh yeah, that makes sense. You can't see what I'm looking at. Let's see. So like, there's this one, and dog class, inherits.
That looks good to me. So can you run your one of, I guess, dog? Yeah. Trace back. No such file animal.rb.
I have to remove the .rb.
Yeah, try that and just do animal.
You might need a // before the animal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's been a while.
It has. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, y'all got it.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. I'm in business now.
So we should see.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then we could also do like, what else have we done? Jeff.fetch, but that won't actually print anything.
Well,
What
is there another animal method that you made?
Yeah, I mean, there's world domination, there's takeover for cats,
Yeah.
and fetch for dogs.
Cool.
What we could do if you wanted to play with it is you put like a pry here, right?
For the script, Brian, that we're writing to execute this, are we supposed to be trying to think of some way in Rails to do that? We're just, oh, go ahead.
No, just in Ruby. So this would be like your runner file.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. When I say script, a script is just like a sequence, like a sequence of execution or like a steps of execution. So sometimes script is like just a Ruby file that runs things. You can write scripts for your terminal for executing terminal commands. So yeah, when I say script, and it's not specific enough. I should say write a Ruby script.
Okay. I just was like, you may not get the best out of me. Okay, cool.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So I hopped around the breakout rooms a little bit, and I think everybody was doing, everybody did a pretty good job. I think I saw most people making some good progress on this. So I think I wanna, I will start by answering any questions that came up. Yeah, we'll go from there. So what questions came up in your groups? Sam.
I was going into this thinking that the super has to have, or let's say you have a defined function or method in the super, and I thought that every child would require having that method, like something like similar to virtual functions, I guess, where the parent class has, if they have like deaf speak and it's not defined there, then the children are required to have that. Like, for example, like animal has like a breathe function that would require every type of animal to be able to breathe. But it seems like that's not the case, that the other classes don't need that method.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. So do you have, Sam, could you share your screen so we could look at an example?
Oh yeah, sure. One sec. So I figured, I don't know if you can see my screen, but I figured if you were to define these methods here, that they would require, the classes under would require some version of that method. So if I was thinking if I were to comment this out and create a human, it would error out saying like error, you need a speak method or something.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so where you're printing out sam.speak there, can you run this file and let's see what happens when we run it?
Yeah.
So you were saying you were under the impression that when a method is defined in the superclass, in this case, animal is our superclass, that means that we have to define it in our subclass. But we can see we just commented out speak right here, and it still let us call the speak method. So can you scroll down to where you call speak on your human?
Oh yeah, it should have been the first thing actually, right before eat.
Yep. So Sam, do you think you could explain, so when we call that speak method on a human, where does Ruby go to look for that speak method?
I guess it looks here first locally, and since it wasn't there, it'll look to the next class being the superclass, and it's there with no action, but it's still doing something, being nothing here. It's doing this method here, I think. Yeah.
Oh, and we actually, we saw hello world. So let's make this a little simpler. Can you scroll down to
save. I'm sorry, I didn't save.
Can you scroll down to your script and just to like check this a little bit better? Let's just comment out 33 through 36. So we're just calling the human.speak method.
Sure.
Yeah. And now now that it's saved, let's run it.
So it's putsing, but then it's putsing nothing. So at least it's running this. And because there is no speak here, it will go to the next scope, I guess. Next thing in line.
So next thing in line, you're dancing around this idea of like ancestors. So technically what you're looking for is ancestors. So if it's not, if a method isn't defined on the class, it will look in that class's superclass. So the class that it's inheriting from. So because our human inherits from animal, it'll look in the animal superclass for that method. Then if it doesn't find it there, it will look in that superclass's superclass. And if it doesn't find there, superclass is superclass is superclass. And it will continue up this ancestry chain until it finds the method. And if it doesn't find the method, what happens?
Then the error will throw, I guess, saying there's no such thing, no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly. So let's go up to our animal class and create that. So we'll comment out that speak method.
Oh, I see. Comment this out and then put this in here, like.
Just comment out the animal speak method.
Okay.
Animal speak
method. Oh, okay. I see. Comment this out here. Okay.
Yeah.
And then run it again?
Yeah.
Sure. There you go.
So now we're going to get undefined method speak for a human object, because now this isn't defined in our class or any of our ancestors. It's not defined in the superclass or the superclass or anything like that.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other? Oh, okay. So Sam, what you were talking about, I'm sorry, I didn't finish what you were asking, because what you're describing where could you screen share again?
Yeah, of course.
Describing where a superclass requires a subclass to implement it is what might be referred to in other programming languages as an abstract class. So if you come from like Java or I don't know if other classes, or I can't think of other, I'm not familiar enough with other programming languages to say for certain, but Java does have this notion of like an abstract class. If you want to define a method in your superclass like speak, and you say that a subclass has to implement it, what you can do is uncomment that speak method, and then inside there raise an error. So say raise.
Oh, okay. Whoops.
And then I believe it's capital N not, and this is going to be camel case not implemented error. Yeah, it's completing for you. And then comma, we can give it a message. And you can say this class did not implement this method or something. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
So now that now that this is what we're inheriting from our superclass, let's run this and see what happens.
Sure. Okay, got it.
So we've just made a custom error that says this class did not implement the speak method. So that's a way you can recreate this like abstract class behavior where subclasses have to implement a certain version of this.
Yeah, I was thinking more in the scope of like, if you're to make a framework for someone or like some version of like, let's say active records or some like gem, and you still need them to require if they're inheriting from one of the classes you made, like, then you would probably want to use something like this, right? Okay, cool.
Thank you, Sam. Let's go to Max.
Yeah, so I misread one of the questions and that led me down a rabbit hole of trying to figure something out that I think is tangentially related, and let me know if it's not relevant. But what does, like in inheritance, when you see the double colon, what does that mean? And is that like to get only a piece of the larger ancestor or the larger superclass, or really, yeah?
Yeah, let me, do you have something we could screen share? And
I don't have anything like helpful, but I could make it if you would rather.
that's okay. As long as you have a Ruby file, we can do something in there. So one example, Max, I'll just have you type this out just so we can see it. Can you do class underneath this cat class? Can you do class cat test inherits from mini test test? So this is something that you're probably pretty much muscle memory by this point, but this is what you're talking about, right? This colon thing.
Yes.
So this colon operator is what I would call the namespace resolution operator. That's the technical term for it. Really, this is just like indicating a namespace. And a namespace does not have anything to do with inheritance. This is a way of grouping. That is a way that you can organize your classes. So what this means is that there's a mini test module and there is a test class inside that module. So underneath this cat test, can you make a module? Can you say module mini test? And lowercase m module. Yep, and then let's end our module. And then inside there, let's define a class called test. Yep. So this syntax of mini test colon test means look inside a mini test module for a class called test. So what, Max, what you've just typed out with this mini test module, this is what I'm imagining that somewhere in the mini test library, this is defined. So really colon just means look inside of this thing. So in this case, look inside of the mini test module. So we could continue to like nest modules in here, and then we could have a namespace resolution operator for each one. Yeah.
Gotcha. Is there a way so let's say then you've got like a class like small test or something, that this class has some of the same things as this one does?
Maybe if there are things that you need to share across those two, you might create a, maybe what you have instead is that you have class small test inherits from test.
Gotcha.
And then maybe you have another class that's class big test also inherits from big test. So there might be methods you define in your test class that need to be inherited in all of these like sub-test categories.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense to me. So you can inherit from the same level that you're in. Is that right?
Yeah, and Sam's code was an example of that, where Sam had both the parent and the children defined in the same file. So where you define these classes doesn't necessarily matter. As long as they are loaded and your application Ruby knows about them, you can reference them as superclasses.
Would this still work, or would this now not?
I think that might not work. But yeah, what you would probably do is you would probably like have a separate file for each different class.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh,
Yeah, so
sorry.
that's-
One question on that then. So if you had a separate file for each class, how would you make them be part of the module mini test?
I think you would just define them all inside a module mini test. And yeah, that's kind of like stretching the limits of what I know about how module, like namespacing with modules works. I think you would just define the same module twice and it would put them both in that module.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. What other questions do y'all have? Can I get, if there aren't any other questions, can I get another volunteer to show us your solution? What did you come up with for this activity? Phil, you wanna go for it?
Yeah, sure. So I actually created files and such, but have an animal with speak and eat, a bear that overrides speak and has its own like maul method, and then a dog that doesn't change any of the, doesn't override any of its superclass methods, but can howl. And then my runner instantiates the two animals and runs through those things.
Cool. Excuse me. Could you split the screen between all of these files so we could see them all together?
Cool.
Great. So Phil, can you identify? I'm just gonna read the instructions that I gave you all. So in this case, how can you describe what's the relationship between your animal class and your dog and your bear classes?
Yeah, so essentially like in the dog and bear, I know they're children of animal because of this inheritance operator.
Yep. Yep, they are parents and children because of that inheritance. Cool. So for your dog class, I think we did this before, so I'll just do this one. When you call the speak method on line 9 in your runner file right here, when you call the speak method, what happens is that Ruby looks in the dog class for the speak method. When it doesn't find it, it says, okay, well, it's not in this class. Let's check in the parent class. And so it knows that this is the parent class because we've used that bracket operator. So then it goes to animal and looks for it. And then that's what we should see printed out for the dog. And then we do see that down here, dog speak, and it says the animal speaks. The animal speaks. Cool. Can you identify where you overriding the method speak in one of your subclasses?
Yeah, so in the bear over here, essentially, yeah, we kind of talked about this in the breakout room too, of like the lookup chain that you were referring to. Since it's defined in the class, it looks here first and never goes to animal to even see if that exists up there. It knows it's here, so it runs this code instead of looking in the superclass.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned the lookup chain. Something from mod 1, and I'm just going to read this off of this lesson plan from mod 1. So we can say that inheritance is, oh wait, no, that's drawing still. There we go. Inheritance is at its core a mechanism for automatic message delegation. It defines a forwarding path for not understood messages. So essentially, inheritance is what does Ruby do, or the inheritance is what does Ruby do when it doesn't know how to execute a method? Well, if it's not defining a class, it'll look in the superclass and it'll look in all the ancestors until it finds it. Now, modules are also part of this lookup chain. And I believe modules, it will look in included modules right after it looks in the superclass, but we won't talk too much more about modules. We'll just focus on inheritance today. Cool. Any other questions? Phil, can you leave your code up for 1 second? Does anyone, this is what I would expect you to do for this activity. Does anyone have any questions or like anything about what Phil did? Questions for him on how he got this working? Adam.
Yeah, Phil, I don't know if you need the require .animal in the dog and bear, but correct me if I'm wrong. Do you?
That's a good question. I don't know. I like tried running this a few times and got some require errors. So I just put it everywhere, which like is a bad practice for modeling. It requires in every file.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and,
you're right.
and
Nice.
the reason why that's bad practice is because at least for me, I will say it's because other languages aren't so nice about requiring things as Ruby. Other languages, if you require something twice, it'll freak out and it won't work. So I would recommend against doing that. So with requiring things, Rails is nice because Rails loads up all of our files for us. So I said this before when I mentioned the Rails console. Rails console will load up all of your application code. That's why you get access to your models in your Rails console. So Rails is really nice. We don't have to require anything. If you're just writing Ruby code, my recommendation is to include the file when you are using a constant that is defined in the file. So for example, because you're including this animal constant, this animal class in your dog class, you should require that file, this animal file, so that it knows what this animal class is inside this dog class. So I would recommend leaving require animal in both your dog and your bear classes. And then because animal is required in both of those classes, what you can do is you can take that out of that runner file require. Yep, because bear and animal already, or bear and dog already require them. Yeah. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Okay, I've got another practice activity for you all that I am going to, how am I going to do this? I'm just going to type this out in the code help channel, just like I did earlier. By the way, I didn't build in any POMs just because this was a shorter lesson. So my plan is to go for maybe another, like, give you all another 5 minutes to do some solo work. And if you really need to take a POM right now, that's fine. But I'm going to put this activity in here in your code help channel. Okay, so I just dropped those instructions into code help. This is going to do a little bit of practice with these concepts in Rails. So we'll get to see an example of how this will work in Rails. I'm going to do it the same format. We'll give you all 5 minutes. So around 1:45, I'll put you into some small groups for a couple minutes, and then we'll go over it, and then we will be done. Is my audio coming in roboty or staticky?
It sounds good now, but it was for a minute.
It did switch. It did earlier. It switched.
Just for like 30 seconds.
If that happens again, just let me know, because I'm still trying to figure out when and why that happens. Does anyone need any help checking out that branch from GitHub? I'm happy to work through that, especially since we just talked about that this morning. So I think it'd be great for us to see an example of it in practice.
Yeah, I would like that.
Perfect. Yeah, a couple of people. V, would you mind sharing, and we can work through it together?
Sure. So I try to create that branch locally and then pull, but it's not working.
Okay, so let's try that Git. Can you hit enter and let's see what that says. So it says, yeah, warning, pulling without specifying how to reconcile divergent branches shows you can switch. You can replace blah, blah. Fatal origin does not appear to be a Git repository. Could not read from remote repository. Okay, so do a Git remote -v from the command line. And we can see here that we don't have any remotes listed. So if you do Git remote -v and you don't have anything listed, that's why it's saying we don't have this origin as our remote repository. So what we need to do is we need to add our origin. So let's go to GitHub from the in a browser.
And we
find
only
that set
do
list.
it on these.
Okay.
And let's copy that SSH key. If you, I think you might have grabbed part of it. If you click this button right here, that's to copy it. Yep, there you go. And so now what we want to do is we want to make that our origin. So the way we do that is with Git Remote Add. And then we say origin to tell us, yeah, before you do that, do origin. So we need to tell it what's the name of our origin, or sorry, what's the name of our remote. And then we need to tell it what's the GitHub address. So now we should be able to hit enter. And now we should be able to pull from that remote. So do git pull origin. Yeah, and so we're ending up with see how it says like refusing to merge unrelated histories. So I think what's going on here is that at some point you might have like created a new setlist app, or you might have it seems like it just got out of sync with our remote. So what I would recommend that you do is just clone down a new copy of that setlist app. So because this is just an app that we're working on in class for practice, it's okay to download a new copy of it. Yeah, so you could like CD out of this and clone it in there. Yeah, and it looks like we've already got a setlist app. Oh, before you do that, V, let me show you an alternate way to do this if you run into this. So if you have a folder that already has the name of the repo you're trying to clone, can you hit up to get that same command that you just did for clone? You can add in another argument at the end of this, so do space, and then you can give it the name of a new folder to put it in. So you could say like setlist2.
Nice.
There you go. So now let's CD into setlist2. And because we cloned this down, it should have fetched all of our branches for us. So I think you should be able to do a git checkout of inheritance practice.
How do you spell this?
INHERITANCE. Yep, _ practice. And there we go. Now you're on that branch. So one thing we didn't really talk about too much this morning, but if you just need some code just to see, just to look at, it's okay to just clone down a new copy. Yeah, you don't want to do something like this if you're working on a project with someone where you're sharing code, but if you just wanted to look at the code and do work locally, this is okay. Does anyone have any other Git things that they're running into? Phil.
Yeah, I might just be a little confused about the lesson or the exercise. So when I go into my models, I have a lot of methods in here that I can see like how to dry these up, like, and none of them are related. Maybe there's only one.
Can you share your screen and show me what you're seeing?
Yeah. Maybe I'm just confused. I guess I see this is a duplicate, so maybe that is where to start. Okay.
Yeah, so there's just a one example in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, so you should have those
Thank
most
you.
recently
Yeah, sorry.
updated methods. No, you're good, Phil. No, you're good. No harm in clarifying. All right, everybody, now that you've had a chance to look at it, I am going to put you back in your rooms for, I'll do 5 minutes this time, and I'll let you all talk about this together.
Quick question for you. In this case, I'm looking at the models. They both inherit from application record. The class method that's the same, most recently updated, could we move that to application record?
Yep, you're on the right track.
Oh.
You're on the right, yeah. So you've got the right idea here. You are going to have to do something to edit the method to make it work for both classes. But yeah, that is correct.
Could we just use like self.order instead of song and artist.order?
Yeah, I think you got it.
Okay.
So, okay, that makes me, because I always think of like application record and application controller as like files we can't touch.
Yeah, so this is a great activity for us to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Same.
So I wasn't sure.
To my understanding, if you have like like a class method self dot something, if you put a self or if you don't,
yeah. And the cool thing is like even here, like we could take these away because self is that class, like in this case. So it's kind of just
redundant. For me, that it happened when I changed the head of it, but it could have been some other reason.
We've finally gotten the correct code, Brian.
So. Oh, pulled down.
Yeah.
Do you all have an idea of how you're going to tackle this, or was anybody able to get it on their own?
Could I run you through my thought process and bounce it off you?
Yep.
So I was just going to make another method in the application controller to dry up these two. So they're very similar in terms of the most recent, but this one here is for the songs class. This is the artist class. So I was going to put like self here, dot order. So depending on we can just like get rid of this, sorry. So when we call it from the parent, it's going to be called on that self anyway. So it's going to be like redundant. And so depending on what we call it, that's going to be defined by which model or which table we're doing it off. So essentially what I'm thinking, feeling, definitely for sure more feeling. It's going to be like
so
that.
I'll stop you right here because I think that all sounds good. You're definitely on the right track. One thing to keep in mind, what class do our models inherit from?
application record and I'm in not that one. Okay.
Right. So if you define it in application controller, you won't actually inherit it. But yeah, your approach sounds good.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And sorry, Brian, one question on that. Is it okay to do it in application record, or should we be making another class? And
I would
also-
do it in application record.
Okay.
Right? So I did artist and it gives us this. And I called self and it gives us the same thing. So my hope is that you could just do that. What do you guys think?
That in like an at songs or in an at artists. So yeah, I don't think this actually works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Hey, Brian, do you think that this would work in any way?
Application controller. Oh, so you're trying to create a method on application controller that will work for multiple controllers. Is that right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But we were
So
just talking about how like if we're trying to collect like at songs or at artists, then that doesn't work.
If you're trying to collect at songs, right? Yeah. So I see what you're trying to do here, and I think you're on the right track of like doing something that could be done in multiple controllers. Multiple controllers might get this sort param and order their objects based on that. But yeah, you're running into this issue where like, how do you know what attribute to sort on? It seems like you've assumed that it's called name, but you don't necessarily know. So it's like, I think you're on the right track of getting this to work. This is a little bit, the application controller one is definitely a harder one to come up with a scenario for. And it's something that will become more relevant in mod 3. We'll use application controller more.
Cool.
I'm gonna close out our breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopping around the breakout rooms, it seems like everybody had the right approach. And I think a lot of you implemented this solution. So yeah, I'd love for someone to share with us. Can I get a volunteer for sharing the first part of the activity for drawing up the models? Catherine.
Yeah. Okay. So this method was in both artist and song, and we moved it to application record since both inherit from application record. And then both of them had their own class here. So we originally changed, so it was like artist. And then we put a pry in there and saw that self would do the same thing as whatever we were in. But since it was called self twice, we tried to just take this self out, and that still worked, but we're not totally sure why.
Catherine, can you go through that process of like prying into the method? And I think an important thing here is like, what do you mean when you say like pry the method? Like, how do we just try a method out?
So I ran the artist spec. And then here we are in the method. So we saw what artist was, and then we tried self, and they're the same. So we figured self would go there.
Can you open up that artist spec so we can see what how we got to this method?
So I mean, this was already all in here. So So I didn't change anything. I just assumed that it would have a test that used that. Here it is.
Mhm. Right. So we can see on line 37, that's where we're calling artist.most recently updated. So following our same process as before, when we were just doing the animals and the dogs, it's first going to look in the artist class, and because we're calling this on a class and not an instance, it's going to look for an artist class method called most recently updated. It doesn't find it, so then it looks in the superclass. The superclass is defined as application record right here. So then it's going to go to the application record class. Can you open that one up, Catherine? And it's going to look for a class method called most recently updated. It finds it, and so it runs this method right here. Okay, so you're pried into this method right here, and this method is defined on application record. So what did anyone have any or Catherine, I guess, can you answer this? What are some other possibilities that you thought might have appeared for that value of self? We saw that it was an artist, but what else could it have been?
It could have been song. We weren't in that test, but it could have been song, and then it could have been application record.
Yeah, so you might think that application record, yeah, song, because we're calling this method on, we have this method inherited from two different models. Maybe we were actually in the song and not the artist. Or you might think that, especially based on class this morning, that self always refers to whatever class where the method was defined. So self, in this case, you might think would refer to application record, but that's actually not how self works. The way that self works is that self takes on the value of whatever you call the method on. So if you go back to your test, Catherine, what we called this method on was our artist class. So even though we have this method defined in one place, it can behave differently depending on what we call it on. And this is what is known as polymorphism in programming. Polymorphism, you define the method in one place and it behaves differently based on which subclass it's implemented on. And then Catherine, just for completeness, can you keep going and show us that it still works on the song class as well?
Yeah, sure. Oh, it's going to hit I left the pry in there.
That's okay. So go through that same process to demonstrate to us what's the value of self inside the method now. So now it's our song.
The same as song, yeah.
Yeah, great job. So that is, again, illustrating that point that self can take on different values depending on what method you called it on. Yeah, and then the other thing you mentioned, Catherine, can you go back to application record? So I think what you were saying was that the first version was you had self dot in front of order.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so because we've seen that self can dynamically take on whichever class we call this on, well, we can use that fact to then call this order method on either one of those classes. And because both of them have an updated at column, it should work on both of them. In Ruby, self dot is always implied. So anytime you say self dot and then method call, you can always just replace it with take out that self dot. Cool. So it's very important to know that self dot order, blah, 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 and just order, those do exactly the same thing. Ruby sees them as the exact same method calls. Eli, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, in terms of testing this, like the way that we have it currently, is that kind of how you'd want to test it? Like test it on all the things that you're calling this method on, or would we test it like in its own and get rid of those ones?
Yeah, I think typically if you have a method that is, it depends on what the method is, I think. But if it's inherited, if you define it in an application record and it's inherited in all your models, I probably wouldn't test that it works on all of the models. I would probably just test that it works on one of the models and assume that it will work on the other models because if it works on one model, why wouldn't it work on all the other models? The only reason why I would make that test for each model is if there is some scenario that I can think of where it wouldn't behave exactly the same for a different model. That's the only reason I would test that multiple times.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. Other questions, or Catherine, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that y'all did?
I don't think so. Not for me specifically, I guess. I can't speak to the class.
Gotcha. Cool. The other part of the activity was adding something to application controller. I don't want to go over that right now because that is a little bit more difficult to do. I think the application record is the more easy example for now. So we won't go over application controller at the moment, but something that you can do as you work through your projects is keep the same process in mind. Identify the duplicate code. So in this case, I already had those duplicate methods for you all to look at. Identify duplicate code, and then think of, is there a way that I could inherit this method from application controller rather than define it twice? So when it comes to defining inheritance, usually we don't just like define it right off the bat. What I had you do for the practice activity is not very likely, where I say like create these 3 classes with a superclass. What you will do in practice is you'll write the code out, identify duplicates, and then create the superclass or the method on the superclass to share that code. So usually we don't refactor until we have a reason to refactor. Sam?
I know you didn't want to mention or talk too in depth about the controller part of inheritance, but if there's a way to quickly answer or in a brief explanation, like let's say you have a parent and child that their actions in terms of controller are essentially the exact same. They're just looking for an ID and they want to redirect somewhere, depending on what link you click. The only difference that I would say that's stopping me from inheriting from an application controller common method would be that the redirect is different or the URLs are different. Is there a way to get past that?
Yeah, and so kind of what you're saying is like if we take like the show action, for example, almost all of our show actions are going to look very similar, where you say like, if it's a song show, it's probably something like @song equals song.find params ID. And that is just kind of the same for most of our controllers. So you might think like, oh, this is something that I should just inherit from application controller so I don't have to do it every single time. And the answer is yes, you can get around, you can write some code to like have this work for any controllers. The problem is that code that you would have to write would be very complex. What you would have to do is you would probably have to like take the name of the controller, like songs controller, find the singular version of that to get song, which will give you a string song, take that string, translate it into the model to go from string to constant, and then you can use that constant to then call methods. So kind of what we're doing, what I'm describing is metaprogramming, where I'm like using code to then like write more code, and it just gets too complex. So for your standard CRUD actions, yes, there are ways to metaprogram around it, but you'll just end up with a lot more complex code than if you just recreate the actions. So a lot of times, like while inheritance is a powerful tool, it's not you shouldn't use it wherever you find a good example. Wherever you can use it, you shouldn't always use it because sometimes it just makes things too complex.
Cool, that's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, y'all. I think this is a good place to wrap it up. So our project is due. It's going to be due tonight. So if you have an opportunity to do some refactoring, see if you can find an opportunity to implement something in application record, and that is the 4 for our active record category for the project. If not, if you don't get to it today, we are going to have more chances to implement inheritance in the next project. I do want to make a quick note about the project. Based on some check-ins yesterday, there was some, not confusion, but something I wanted to talk about with one of the user stories. And I don't want you all to, if you saw my slides, I ended up not making anything for those slides. So y'all didn't miss anything. Projects, relational Rails. User story 16. Okay, so for user story 16, sort parents by number of children. The only way to do this with using active record, purely active record, would be to incorporate joins as well as grouping and aggregating into your query. So joins, grouping, and aggregating are things that we haven't covered yet this mod, but it is something that was brought up in the intermission work. So I think some of you all have been able to apply those concepts to this story to make this work. And that's great. If you do that, you're kind of just like reaching for the next thing that we're going to teach you in this mod. So I would recommend that you do it that way. But if you aren't able to do this using a joins and a group and an aggregate, it is okay to use some Ruby to process this rather than pure active record, because we haven't been over the active record you would need. So if you look at our rubric, it says active record, no Ruby is used to process data. We'll make an exception for that single story because we haven't been over the active record that you'll need. Does anyone have any questions on that? With that in mind, there are going to be many different ways to do that story 16. All right, y'all. If that's it, then I will let you go here. I'm going to drop the survey into your channel in just a second. And once you fill that out, the rest of the day is work time. And thank you all very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep, you're welcome.